Hello everybody, today's video will be quite an interesting one. As some of you already know, I do story writing in my free time and have a passion project called Deserted Journals. Today I'll be talking about the original lore and ideas of Deserted Journals since I recently did a major rework to its lore. Before I get onto that, I'd like to say that there are a few iterations of the lore for Deserted Journals, so I will be talking about them in the order that I made them, or at least the order that I remember making them. There won't be many visuals thrown on screen, and I didn't want it to look empty, so that's why you're seeing this Sundowner gameplay in the background while I'm talking. However, when visuals are shown though, you're free to pause the video if you want to take the time to read them. If you're interested in reading any of my works of writing, you can find a link to my Discord server in the description. Now then, let's get on to the first iteration of the Deserted Journals lore. The first iteration of Deserted Journals, or as I like to call it, the Classic Edition, was pretty barren in terms of lore. As some of you know, Deserted Journals came to be after I had a dream and decided to write it down and turn it into a story. Originally, Deserted Journals wasn't supposed to have any lore whatsoever. It was just going to be a series of short stories similar to the dream that I had. It was just going to be something that people could read and enjoy without anything outside of that. Outside of being just a series of 10 short stories, there wasn't really anything else to it, so I'll move on to the next iteration. The second iteration of Deserted Journals, or as I call it, the Evolutionized edition, was definitely much more lively in terms of lore, but not as deep as the current iteration. This edition, or this iteration, is where the SEA came into the lore. I had been thinking about what if I had a company collecting these journals, or, for that matter, anything strange in general. Then, after creating the SEA, I realized that it would probably be best to have a group either going against them or rebelling against the SCA, and so I created the Nocturnus Vigilia. In this version of the lore, the SCA was supposed to have internal conflicts within the organization due to people arguing over whether or not the journals were real. There were also two items that had a pretty important role in the lore. These two items were the Alpha and Omega Testament. They were supposed to hint at the fact that the SEA would bring their world to an end, because originally the SEA was supposed to be responsible for everything that happens within the lore. For the Alpha and Omega Testament, I'd actually thought about altering parts of the Bible to fit the story, but I'd realized that that was too big a task to do, so I actually ended up scrapping that idea. Outside of that, though, there wasn't really much planned lore for this iteration, so once again, on to the next one. The third iteration of Deserted Journals, or as I call it, the Archived, since this was the main version before the rework that's being archived, or Advanced Edition, is where Artist Robotics was introduced into the story. In this iteration, Artist Robotics was supposed to be a major nuisance and problem for both the SEA and Nocturnus Vigilia. Artist Robotics didn't play as big of a role as they do in the current iteration, though, but they still played a major part in this version. In this iteration, the SEA was responsible for the journals. Wait. Oh, I'm stupid, sorry. I meant to say that in this iteration, Artist Robotics was responsible for the journals appearing, albeit in a different way than the current iteration. The journals themselves weren't supposed to be as connected as they are in today's lore. In this iteration, they're also at fault for the infected version of Vesp existing. In this iteration, the SCA was supposed to capture Vesp and study her while also studying the journals. While this was happening, 4 agents were supposed to be kidnapped by the Nocturnus Vigilia and be held hostage. After finding out the SCA was supposed to be taking a stealthy approach to try and rescue these agents. However, unfortunately for the SCA, Vesp would have ended up breaking out and somehow made her way to the Nocturnus Vigilia base and went on a killing spree with their staff, and infected like at least 15 people. At this point, the SCA was supposed to go to war with the Nocturnus Vigilia, but neither side really won, because at the end of it, the SCA decided to use explosives to take down the Nocturnus Vigilia. They had blown up the entire base, but at the cost of killing a majority of their agents, with only Tau and Delta surviving. After the war between them, Agent Tau and Delta were supposed to go explore the abandoned ruins where the hazmat team went missing a couple of months ago. They were supposed to find a weird contraption and end up in a universe not of their own, and that's pretty much where it was supposed to end for this iteration, because I never really wanted it to have a full closure or end of the story. But I'll get on to the next iteration now. The fourth and current iteration of Deserted Journals, or as I call it, the Deluxe edition, was the turning point where I decided that it was necessary to revamp the lore and update it. Trying to add new ideas and lore while integrating the old stuff somewhere in there had eventually caught up to me. It was no longer a viable option, since the lore was kind of a mess with a lot of plot holes and connections that didn't make sense. This iteration got rid of all the old stuff that was no longer relevant and made the SCA and Nocturnus Vigilia a much less important part of the whole story, while making Artist Robotics a more important part of it. I would love to say more about this iteration, but it's hard to do so without spoiling the lore. However, I can say that this iteration has much deeper and intricate lore. At the time of creating this video, I've been working on the fourth Deserted Journal, which will be out sometime in the near future. I hope you all look forward to it, as I will be definitely dropping some lore about both Artist Robotics and Limbo with this one. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed watching this video and listening to me rant about all the old lore. I hope that those of you who don't know about my works of writing will be interested in reading them. Until we meet again, my friends.